Hi, everybody. Welcome to Political Head Trauma. This is your host, Jared Anderson, and myself, Holly, and we are very excited to be here today. We're introducing our guest today, Colby Jenkins, who's running for Congress in District 2, and he is running against Celeste Malloy.
Yes. Yeah, we're excited to talk with him. I don't know why this isn't bleeding across live right now, but we'll have to see how it does. Okay, it's coming across on yours. All right, we're good. But anyways, yeah, so we got Colby coming on. I'm excited to talk to him. He is a former U.S. Army Special Forces colonel. He's worked as a liaison to Congress and I think to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, things like that. So excited to hear his insight, and we're going to listen to just his thoughts on why he wants to be our congressman, and what he would plan to do, his goals in that.
What a resume.
Yeah,
I mean, Green Beret Colonel.
Yeah, he's got a heavy duty resume.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service. Let's bring him in.
Yep, let's bring him in. All right, Colby, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you? Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
Good.
you for being on, and thank you for your service, sir.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you. It's a family business for sure.
Yeah, I was reading on your website that your grandmother served in World War II.
My grandfather. Yes.
Or your grandfather. I apologize. I must not know how to read.
That's okay.
Although there were plenty of women who served in World War II,
for sure.
Medical staff and such, but not to the same that women serve nowadays.
Yes.
A different time and a different era. So you were a Special Forces colonel, and then you went on. I'll just pull up your website, make sure I don't get this incorrect, and we'll share the website. The website is colbyforutah.com. And then you went on and you did some where are we at? Okay, so you were a civilian legislative strategic advisor to the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's a lot of words to say. I worked in the Pentagon and managed legislative affairs for the chairman and the vice chairman. Yes.
Okay, and then so was that? How do I put this? Was that you being kind of being a go-between between the legislative side and the vice chairman? Kind of, I don't know, how do I say this easier, but being a dictionary for what the other one said so that they would understand it?
A little bit. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. If you want, I could start from the beginning or tell you just about that.
Yeah,
DC period.
Let's start from the beginning. You're a West Point graduate. You went in, you go into the Army. I'll just lay out the quick military career. You go into the Army, infantry officer, you get Ranger tab, and then you pursue Special Forces. You get Special Forces. And then were you a full bird when you got out?
I'm actually still in. I'm in the reserve. Oh. Yeah, I'm a senior colonel now, full colonel. Yeah.
Okay.
5 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Old colonel.
All right. What unit are you with? The 96 here in Utah, or?
I'm not. I'm actually with the unit that works for the chief of the Army Reserve in DC.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I go back there every so often.
Okay. Well, no, that's good.
How old were you when you got in? Were you still like out of high school or college?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Roosevelt, Utah, out in the Uinta Basin. Small town, family homesteaded there. That's where my roots are from and still are. And from Roosevelt, I went to West Point right out of high school. I was the first kid from Duchesne County to ever go to military academy. And yeah, when you get accepted to the academy, it's 4 years a full ride essentially. That you
It's a different type of scholarship.
Well, don't you have to have like senator's recommendations and things like that?
Yes.
You do, yeah. It's a congressional nomination from either
Mhm.
a congressman or a senator or the president. And so I got a nomination, and then West Point accept that. There's roughly about 13,000-ish that apply every year, and then about 5,000 get a nomination, and then West Point will pick about 1,000 from those.
Wow. So that alone is pretty exceptional. I mean, that's cool.
Well,
Yeah.
I just share it because I was a small town kid that came from small town Duchesne County, but the reason I even had a shot is because I had good people around me. I had a tremendous high school counselor and Ina Nilsson, and coaches and parents. You know, when I started saying this is what I would like to do, none of them said, I don't think so. No, they all said, how can we help? Yeah, let's do this. And so
I hate to call you out, but what year was that when you graduated?
yeah, no problem. High school was 93.
You graduated in 93?
High school, yes,
We're
ma'am.
the same age, sir.
He's a year older than we are.
What have I done
So-
with my life? I graduated in 93.
I graduated in 94.
So we all got a lot of living left. We're all young.
And I'm
young
also
bucks.
Thank you.
I'm also a veteran.
Oh, well, thank you for your service. Yeah.
My time was easy. You guys, the guys that went over this knew I was in under Clinton. I mean, I went to Gitmo and processed, I guess, immigrants over. I don't
you
know.
can't
They were
say
actually
illegal
asylum
immigrants.
seekers then.
Oh,
You have to
okay.
call
That was-
them illegally migrating people.
Undocumented individuals. But anyways,
Law-breaking immigrants.
yeah, I was a part of that JTF 160. So my time was easy. It's you guys that went over to the sandbox that earned it. I mean, this is a heavy thing that these young guys, especially now, I think we're going to see a lot of needs boil out of this, much in the same way we saw boil out of Vietnam.
And
But-
my dad was a veteran in Vietnam. And so he was there in 69 for,
Wow.
I think, 13 months. No one comes home the same, whether it's you're fighting in the jungle or in the sandbox, as he says, which is totally different sort of fighting. I think that our veterans do what they have to do. And I think the military of our past was exceptional and extraordinary. And I'm disappointed that we didn't get the wins. But then after years go by and hindsight and all of that, I mean, did we belong there? I think a lot of veterans ask ourselves that. And
Well, it's the scope. It's a different war. World War II, where you had defined armies, it's the guerrilla warfare that causes that large toll, because you're essentially never out of contact. And that's what they found when they psychologically studied Vietnam was, World War I, average contact, I think was something like 25 days a year. World War II, 32 days a year. Vietnam was 220 days a year, average contact. And that's where, but anyways, that's not what I wanted to go with. And this is going to be, I promise, probably the hardest one. And you may not be able to answer this, but what are your thoughts? Okay, we know that our military is having a hard time with recruitment. There's a lot of speculation about that. I have my own speculation.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on, it seems like we've got a modern military leadership that's leaning into this, for lack of a better term, woke narrative that I think is one, undermining its usual pond that it fishes in, and also at the same time, in my feeling, and I may be incorrect, weakens the overall combat readiness of the military. And what are your thoughts on that? And as a congressman, you would be faced with that. You would be faced with asking the Joint Chiefs, which you probably personally know, why do you keep leaning into this when every time you lean into it, the young men from Tennessee that make up virtually, 15% of our military, when they're a state that shouldn't make up that much, decide to say, that's not the place for me. That's not a place where I'll feel valued or safe.
rural Utah, rural anywhere, the usual pond per se.
Yeah.
He's getting less and less in recruitment.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. And really at the heart of why I'm even in this race. Just some context before I answer. So my wife and I, we have 2 daughters. Our youngest daughter, Olivia, she's at West Point right now.
Wow.
Oh, congratulations.
That's incredible.
She's incredible all on her own. She's the first girl from St. George to ever go to the academy, and she's doing great. And
no kid, the first one from St. George.
First one from St. George.
That's incredible.
There's been an awesome gal that graduated last year from Hurricane. So we've had Washington County represented, but yeah, she's the first from. And the mayor, when she got accepted to West Point, our St. George mayor gave her a key to the city and gave her a great honor. And
that's incredibly an honor, because having had a college down there, being a college town, you've got a lot of young people, extraordinary people. You and your wife must just be over the moon about that.
It's been good, but I share that.
Does she know what she wants to do military wise?
She's a space science major right now, and
is that it?
And she's always been intrigued with space, and oddly enough, West Point has more astronauts, or has provided more astronauts than any other branch in the military.
That's the thing for anyone listening right now. West Point is not an Army college. It does represent the Army at the football game, but West Point is our military's college. It's everybody.
So does Space Force come out of West Point?
You could choose to branch into Space Force. Annapolis is the Naval Academy.
Mm-hmm.
Air Force is the Air Force Academy in Colorado, and there's Merchant Marines as well. But yeah, I just share that about her because when I look at the military and the problems that you outlined, I've got personal skin in the game.
Yeah.
And when you look at our military from this current administration, they've taken it from a warfighting posture to a social experimental posture.
Mm-hmm.
How can we, currently right now, but believe it or not, they have active policies that if you want to get transgender surgery, the military, the taxpayers are going to pay for it.
And that just kills our warfighting capability.
Not to mention, it makes us look like a joke on the world stage.
Yeah.
You'd never see this in China. You'd never see this in Russia. The actual threats to our nation, or Iran, or any Middle Eastern country, they're laughing at us.
Yes.
Yeah. How many bullets do we have to not buy to turn Timmy into Tammy?
Oh, boy.
That's math.
Yeah, for sure. When it gets right down to it. And, our Army is at its lowest levels since World War II. And the Army has missed its recruiting 2 years in a row. So yeah, we all know the issues. But for me, it boils down to leadership. Our youth, my daughter, they want to follow winners. They join the military to be ultimately a warfighter. They want to be ready and they want to be lethal. They don't want to have social experiments. They don't want to be taught CRT, or they don't want to have a chief diversity officer worrying about
DEI.
They want to fight our wars and win. And
how about like under the Obama administration, where you couldn't even fight, you couldn't be an aggressor, and he was having our military stand down unless they're fired upon, and even then they needed orders. Like, their hands were tied. And in war, America should dominate, shouldn't we?
For sure. When we fail to be a deterrent, like now, of no fault of our soldiers,
right?
But when we fail to present a deterrent, then look at what happens to the world. Look at all of our adversaries are filling their oats, they're crossing their borders, they're stoking the battles because we are not a deterrent. And so for me, it's about leadership. One, it'd be nice if we had a Secretary of Defense that showed up for work.
Oh, geez.
That'd be a good start. And so for me, that's back to, maybe we'll talk about this, but that's why we need to have President Trump back. That leadership matters, and all the downstream choices from a new administration, the new Secretary of Defense, new Secretary of State, all those appointees make a difference. And
he didn't have a really good Secretary of Defense while he was in either, or maybe Milley is just a very political animal that once the new boss got in, he saw the winds of change and said, I'm studying Karl Marx now and I need to understand white rage.
He had a lot of people in with him he couldn't trust. And because a lot of our party was against him right out of the gate. I mean, we had both houses and the presidency, and yet he still had to write executive orders. And I say that a lot.
And they still got ignored.
Do you know President Trump? Have you met him?
I have not personally met him, but certainly worked with people who were in the White House on his staff.
It sounds like you might have a resume to maybe have a position in his cabinet.
Well, I certainly want to be in the foxhole with him as fighting for Utah and then supporting his efforts as well. And on the military topic, I look forward to the opportunity to, I certainly will focus on our home issues. That's my priority, our natural resources and keeping the federal government out of our backyard, which is, we'll talk about that. But I want to also be on the House Armed Services Committee. And if I'm fortunate to be there, boy, I look forward to the day when I can look across at the chairman or the Secretary of Defense and say, I don't think so. I've seen the sausage and how it gets made. I've been in those Pentagon meetings, and they're not going to pull the wool over my eyes. One, because sometimes people are afraid of having military guys as members of Congress because maybe they kneel to the brass. But for me, it's just the opposite. I've seen the chaos, and I have personal skin in the game. So there's no one really better suited than someone who wants to make sure that our military is worthy of the sacrifice of my daughter and her generation that are coming into it.
Was Chris Stewart on that board? I know Chris Stewart was on Homeland Security, I believe.
I think he was on Appropriations, which was his big one. Appropriations is probably.
But he was on one where he had national secrets that came from
Intel.
Intel. That's what it was. I think it helps to have someone with security clearance for one to be on that board, but also someone with skin in the game, of course. And I love the idea of patriots going into government, especially when they've sacrificed. They signed a blank check to America, and usually most of the veterans I know, they've lived a life of service in some way, and they've lived by example. And it's nice to see them serve in an office where they are for the people. It's just, I don't know what happens to people in DC. I don't know if it's the water or what that changes people. They'll go there, they'll fight, and then all of a sudden they're wrapped into the DEI, or they're looking to retire and become lobbyists, or I don't know what happens in DC, but it gets upsetting.
It feels like in our military right now, general officers are politicians. They kind of have to be, just because of the level they're at. I feel like our field grade and below are still, and this has been commented, I'm not the first to comment this, it's commented everywhere, they're still running in that grain of really just traditionally conservative American, I guess is the word to use. But I think the general officers, I think Obama's purge that he did, what was it, in 2014, where he got rid of over 100 field grade majors and light colonels and full birds. Yeah, I think it was 149. He washed them out on political reasons.
Well, and I think Biden has just done the same thing.
I think we're feeling that now
after the mandates and the COVID vaccine.
Because when you move those colonels out, those colonels yesterday are today's generals.
Yeah.
And if you wash those out for political reasons, you empty out a political dichotomy you would hope for. You'd hope your nation to be reflected in your military leadership.
Yeah.
And I think we're paying for that now. We're seeing it. And I don't mean to disparage Milley, but the things he said right as Trump was leaving and Biden got in were concerning to me. Just knowing, one, what it'll do to, I mean, we've seen this woke agenda destroy our public education system and our higher education system.
A lot of business.
Do I want to see it destroy our military? Yeah.
Well, and this is something I have. When you watch someone addressing the Air Force and a whole bunch of cadets, and they're obviously a man in a dress, I ask myself, like, are we living in a clown world? How are all of these smart patriots who have also signed that blank check to America, how these leaders are the ones guiding them, not only guiding them, but patronizing them for not showing more respect to the skirt of a man who's addressing them. And that's going to get people to hate me. And I don't hate trans people. I love them. I want trans people to have whatever in life they need. And usually I think that good therapy, if you don't like the body you're in, you need to figure out why. But I hate that it's turned into an accepted thing. Not only that, but it's deep in the military. And under Clinton, it was don't ask, don't tell, just regarding sexual status. And I think even that wasn't a terrible thing, because it wasn't about your sexuality. It wasn't about your gender. It's who can do the job and who can have each other's back and who can they count on when the rest of us are running for the hills. Who's standing in that line? Who cares what your sexuality is, what your gender is? Yeah. And it's just gone from don't ask, don't tell to, hey, go ahead and tell, go ahead and ask, to you respect the skirt and I still have an Adam's apple, but you're going to respect me because I am your female officer. What do you think? I mean, I don't know what you can do about this in Congress. You tell us, what could someone with your rank, with your experience, and I don't know, I don't know how much time you have, but I want to dive deep into, what your experience is, how you could bring it into Congress, because you're one of 485 people roughly. And so one of 4 in Utah.
Yeah.
And I mean, in Utah, I don't know what's going on with our Congress. I mean, they're not always in agreement, right? Even they don't vote the same. But representing rural Utah, I expect whoever wins that seat better be there to represent rural Utah and not Salt Lake City as a whole. We still have a small community where we still have kids going to go to the military when they graduate and do it with pride. But here we are Gen Xers going, wait a second, is this the commander in chief I want my child to serve under? Is this the policy I want them to learn under? Do I want my kid to hate themselves because they're white? Do I want my child to have to go to DEI and then get skipped over for any promotion because they are a Christian male?
Yeah.
Or, just that's a lot. That's a whole lot for me to say. And Jared's probably going to run the rest of the interview because he probably has the right questions to ask. But these are some things going through my mind of who our next leader should be and what they should do. So I'm curious, your thoughts.
Yeah. What's your idea on how would you manage? We saw Congress over the last 2 months have a couple opportunities to ask questions to different, military leadership. I mean, a couple of sad ones to see the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps kind of get rolled up by a congressperson, rightfully, but the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, which when I was in, I met the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps down in Gitmo, and at the time, he was a very impressive dude, and he was what you pictured. When he talked, it sounded like gravel in a cement truck. But to see this occurring a lot is concerning. So as a congressperson, on to you. Let's let you talk.
One more thing. Fred Swain. Hi, Fred. Thank you for tuning in today. And everyone else who is watching. Fred says, and they pay for the ongoing hormone prescriptions. And that's absolutely right. Not only do they do the surgery, that surgery requires constant prescription drug medicine that we don't even know how it'll affect the brain. We don't know how it affects the body. Because there's not long-term studies on many. And so that's a really great point. And that's the taxpayer dollars. When we say the military pays for it, we're talking about you and me that pay for the military because, that's who funds it.
Yeah. There's one other addition to that before I answer the big questions. Under the Biden administration, the military also enables travel for abortions. So if you're in the Department of Defense, you want an abortion, it's not available in the state where you're stationed, then they'll pay for you to go get an abortion and travel back and forth. So essentially, taxpayer dollars are enabling abortions. And in Utah, that's not what we stand for. And that's not what we should fight for. And so for me, just to answer, I think to try and unpack all of that, it boils down to leadership. And that's in my race, this is the 2nd District congressional seat race. That's a key factor we have to look at. Who do you want on that wall fighting for our district? Who do you want tackling these issues that ultimately trickle down and have positive or negative effects on our water, on our land? There's so many national level issues we have to attack that affect us here locally as well. But on the military piece, as long as we have leadership that view the military as a social experiment and not a war fighting machine, then we're going to have these issues. And how I can impact that, it always comes back to funding. Congress can have an impact on that. One member of Congress can. I can find that thread and start pulling it on that DEI program or on the hormone prescription program and pull that thread. And once you start jerking on the funding thread, then people listen and people want to be attentive. They want to be accountable to the member of Congress. And so similar with veterans care. I mean, I'm a senior colonel and I get the runaround from the VA. I can't imagine, our junior service members. And so those are fights that I look forward to having, as a member of Congress.
Trump was taking on the VA when he came in. And I remember Chris Stewart was a very big proponent of fixing the VA. And he said, I remember him saying, Utah's got one of the best. And that's not saying a ton, because the VA, my father died, unfortunately, of a glioblastoma. And I don't blame the VA, but I think a lot of time was driven that they should have done more focused care when they realized what they were doing wasn't working and come back in 6 weeks. That didn't fly. Yeah. And he had to finally go to a private doctor. And he was a huge fan of Trump's. And Trump, in fact, allowed veterans to start seeing private doctors and send the bill to the United States government because the VA is broken. And again, it's broken because of bureaucrats, and it's broken because there's no incentive to fix broken in the U.S. government. So I hope we get Trump back in office, I'm putting everyone on blast. As a Republican, I'm putting everyone on blast. If Trump gets back in that office and I see one of our senators, one of our congressmen, one of any of our electeds go against his good policy, then I will create my own jihad and make sure they are fired. Because we can't have a repeat of 2016 and 2017. And we cannot, America was feared like under Reagan. It wasn't that everyone was terrified of us per se, but they didn't want to mess around and find out. Yeah. And I think under Trump, there was a lot of that. He's this crazy cowboy. We don't know what he's going to do. If he's walking into North Korea, no one else had done that. He'd brokered deals in the Middle East, peace in the Middle East. Are you kidding me? And no one had ever done that. And he didn't start a war. In fact, he tried to get one finished. I want someone in office that's going to guarantee they will support good policy. If it's good policy, I don't want tyrants. I want him to be a tyrant. I don't think Trump is a god by any means, or I don't also think he's a dictator either. I think he's got extraordinary ideas that are America First principles. And I hope that other congressmen with the power of the purse will not only audit what's going to our military funding, but they're going to audit what goes to the FBI. They're going to audit what goes to the CIA, production, and basically profit and loss. We got to see where the money to Ukraine has gone. How are we funding such a losing battle?
We know where that's going.
Why are we? It looks like laundry. It looks like money laundering.
50% for the old man, for the big guy, and then you've got to peel off. Then you've got Act Blue's got to get its cut, and then.
Do you think it's any coincidence the current SecDef used to be on Raytheon's board?
We keep hitting that, don't we?
Yeah.
It seems like we have a revolving door on this stuff.
Yeah, and unfortunately we saw that with our own. Chris Stewart was I'm not here to disparage, but just the reality is, I mean, 3 days after his last day in Congress, he opened up Skyline Capital. You can Google that. Washington, D.C. government consulting firm. It's got the address on K Street. His former chief of staff is now the vice president, and his former general counsel is now the member of Congress. So if you don't think the gravy train is trying to protect itself, we've got
That
to
breaks
stop that.
my heart as someone who adores Chris Stewart, as somebody that has worked highly and closely with Chris Stewart.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
That news broke my heart because he said he stepped down for, family reasons.
Yeah.
And I respected that.
Me too.
I was devastated for him, and I respect that so much. But when this news came out and it was said to me, I think, was it on the show that someone actually said, don't you know that Chris Stewart, and I was like ready to go to war, but they weren't wrong. I'm a pro lobbyist guy because I think that's one way to gather and get a message up, like the NRA, even though the NRA is dog crap and it never does anything for gun owners. The gun owners of America, like the gun owners of America, that is a lobby group that they fight to stop the ATF from kicking your door down and throwing you in jail because you bought a Red Ryder BB gun 8 years ago and it rusted out in the backyard. Whatever the ATF is dreaming up. But it does strike me as suspicious when someone leaves Congress and turns around and starts one up before their term is up.
3 days after they leave Congress too. Yeah. I mean, all of that was in play before, but we're not here to talk about. Let's talk about what was good. Yeah.
So let's read a couple of comments.
Yeah.
Fred says, hi, we've got Amali May on with us also. And she says, she's still learning. Fred says, thank you for your service, Mr. Jenkins. I decided to vote for you weeks ago. Were you at our Lincoln Day dinner?
I had one of my teammates was there, but
I saw your signs.
I've been to Tooele twice. We've done 2 town halls there. I've personally been there twice, and we'll be back again.
Yeah, I want you to come back again where the party sponsors it, and we have you come out with a Meet the Candidates evening. Great. And I'll invite all state candidates out, and hopefully we'll get our state delegates in one place. And if not, I'll do a town hall live with you on Zoom, and then we'll have all the state delegates invited to that.
Perfect.
And I did advertise your town hall that you had on Saturday. Anytime you're out in Tooele, I invite you to please let me know.
Will do. And
I will make sure that we get the word out. But also, I'd like you to meet with Tim Gilley, our local editor for our paper, and have an interview done with him. He's promised me any candidate that comes to the county, he'll sit down and do a piece on, and he's the most fair reporter. We've got ourselves a great little town here.
See, an example of leadership right there. Thank you. You create opportunities for good things to happen. So and
we want everyone to know you. We want everyone to know Celeste. We want to know who you are, what you're going to do. And that way you recognize us when we come calling when you don't do what you're supposed to, or we can praise when you do what you're supposed to, and we can have a working relationship. I do have to say, in Chris Stewart's defense, he was out here all the time as our congressman, and he was highly approachable. So he took our phone calls. I mean, my phone calls from the party. He would always come and do town halls, updates, and he'd tell us what he legally could. But I had him come out to FOP for the Toronto Order of Police conferences my father was hosting, and he was very highly engaged. And so Celeste has been doing the same. I feel like she's been out here so much, and it's so nice. And we have learned to expect that from Congress, as I hope that you will.
Yeah, please don't expect anything less. And if it is, then fire me. I mean, this is a job interview, and I work for you. So that's my perspective for sure.
Good statement right there. Yeah. That is a good one. Imagine, just if you will, everyone, just enter dream world with me. If the whole population, whether you're Democrat or Republican, went for maybe 3 or 4 cycles, maybe a full 8 years of just washing out all the incumbents, might that cause Congress and the Senate to start paying attention to what people in their home districts say?
100%. Yeah.
Then maybe the the bureaucrats would take over the unelected. I don't know. But anyways,
I on that note, I'd like to know, I mean, there's a lot of talk going on right now in Congress regarding the purse. And I'd like to know your thoughts on spending right off the bat. And I don't want to hear just we're done with spending.
good,
I want
you're
to
hitting
hear
his bullet points.
I want to hear your plan to actually bring these purse strings in. And gosh, I'm looking at your website. That doesn't even look like you.
Yeah, I want to.
with the
Well,
beard?
before you answer that, what group were you with?
I was with the 7th Special Forces Group.
Okay.
When they were at Fort Bragg.
Okay. Oh, out of Bragg. So
Yeah.
Spitshine Special Forces even.
Yeah. Well, my
Yeah.
family was there. I was downrange for about 3 years off and on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How rough was that getting deployed? Because I know you guys got deployed different than the regular Army, but more often.
Yeah.
And my brother was at Fort Bragg, and they talk about how rough it was to go overseas and then come back. And he said one of the hard parts was getting back to the conformity of Fort Bragg, or now I guess it's Fort Freedom or Fort Liberty or
Liberty,
something,
whatever.
which we can go into that, for all you lefty nut jobs, when they named all those Southern installations after Confederate generals, it was a poke in the eye to the South. It wasn't to honor them. You guys need to understand it. But anyways, but he said it was hard to get back into the spit and polish that Fort Bragg demands. Fort Bragg that's where the Army goes to get tested, Yeah. Do you have are your boots shiny enough? Are airplanes having to shade under their eyeballs as they fly over because of all the shine?
Is Fort Bragg in Texas?
No.
It's in North Carolina.
North Carolina. No, Fort Hood is in Texas.
Oh,
Fort Hood is
Hood.
the exact opposite. That's where the Army goes to test whether the MP Corps can investigate crimes.
Yeah, they have a lot
Okay, as the guest,
Sad but true.
All right.
will you tell us your plan as far as the purse strings and how far are you willing to take it? Are you willing to defund agencies if they don't comply? I mean, we've got bureaucrats running this country right now, bureaucrats that outlive you, me, presidents, senators. I mean, they're always there. And when they're called upon in front of Senate or Congress, they don't have the notes. They're required to answer questions and they shuffle, and it looks like political theater. And I know most everyone within the sound of my voice is so sick of the norm, and we're sick of the political theater. We want to see action. We're tired of playing defense as Republicans all the time. Defense, defense, defense. And yet we also are ready to shake it up and let's see what happens if we stop being ignored by our government. As Jared said, we have to make an impact. And I'm wondering, what impact are you going to make?
Yeah. So when I approach any vote or decision on your behalf, there will be 3 lenses that I'll be looking through. One is limiting government. Am I voting to grow government or limit it? And I better not be voting to grow it, because if I am, then I better be subtracting from somewhere else. And an example of that is especially in the Pentagon, if the procurement system is just completely broken. It takes us 20 years to build a new airplane. So rather than fix the procurement process or defund it, they simply put a Band-Aid on it and create now a rapid agency or an innovative department. And they put 4 or 5 Band-Aids on what was ultimately broken down below.
They just call it a different name.
And they'll stand up.
Or they start a whole new.
Do doors fly off when you're in midair, like they are with the Boeing?
Yeah,
that's hilarious. So you got to check. You got to check up the chain of command of different bureaucracies and come back down. Good heck.
So for me, I'll be asking myself, if I'm casting a vote to grow anything or create something new, my first reaction is going to be, well, what isn't working, and how much are we funding it? Because let's either fix that or let's defund it before we grow anything new. So limiting government will be top of mind. Fiscal responsibility, fiscal conservatism. Am I voting to spend new money, which we don't have? So I better not be voting that way. But if I'm being asked to vote to spend new money, it's going to be at the cost of something else. So for example, we have 80,000 plus new IRS agents.
Right.
If we're going to
Armed
spend
IRS agents.
yeah. So there has to be what's called a pay-go. If I'm paying for this to go, then there has to be something else that's paying the bill for the new thing to be stood up. There can't just be new. There has to be subtraction and limiting before we ever build or spend new. So those would be two things that would be in my mind as I'm considering any vote. And then the third one is national security. Am I voting? Is this vote going to jeopardize or weaken our national security in any way? Then I better be stepping back and asking myself, what am I doing? So those would be three ways that I would be looking at how am I going to vote? How am I going to limit spending? And you hit on something that I want to be my calling card. I've been in the 9 years I spent in Washington, D.C. as a Green Beret liaison, working in Congress, working in the Pentagon. I went to a ton of Capitol Hill hearings. And the common thing that you hit on is when somebody gets asked a tough question, they undoubtedly say, oh, Congressman, I'll have to take that for the record and we'll get back to you. And everybody says, yeah, that sounds good.
And in my home, I'm watching going, I all of a sudden turn into Judge Judy and say, well, where did you think you were coming today?
Yeah.
The beach?
Yeah. So those answers never see the light of day. So for me, as a member of Congress, if I'm sitting and the Secretary of Defense gives me an answer like that, or anybody that's accountable to you, my constituent, and they say, oh, we'll take that for the record, then my response will be, great. Where are you going to be for breakfast tomorrow? Where are you going to be for lunch tomorrow? Those 10,000 people that work for you, they can help you get that answer and we'll get it tomorrow. Oh, you're not available tomorrow? I'm just going to drive.
Why don't you use that little device that everybody has and send a text to the person who knows so that we can get this answer now for the people?
For sure. So I'm going to be speaking with the fury of the 800,000 from our district and not going to sit until we get the answers we're asking for, because I've seen it. I've seen that game played and I'm not going to play it.
So you've mentioned on your website, you mentioned a couple of different things, and I'm just going to cover some of those bullet points and let you dig in on them for the people.
Yeah.
Defense of Second Amendment. And I want to go with overall defense of the Bill of Rights. What's your thoughts on this new TikTok ban that came down?
Yeah. So for me, my Congress our founders intended Congress to be a body of compromise, but that compromise only happens under the umbrella of the Constitution. So for me, I imagine I'm standing under an umbrella and I'm standing on the Constitution, and I'll negotiate all day long under that umbrella. But if you're pulling me out and I've got a foot now outside and I'm tap dancing outside, then I'm wrong and I got to get back. And so any vote, any bill that has a poison pill attached to it that compromises on our constitutional rights, say the Fourth Amendment. There's an example back in December where my opponent cast a vote in favor of the military authorization bill, but it had a critical poison pill attached that allowed the government to continue to spy on us. And rather than say no, like Senator Lee did, she was a rubber stamp and passed it on and said, hey, I'm for the military and we'll fix that later. No, that's not okay. Congress has to do its job. We have to defend our Bill of Rights. And so on the TikTok debate and what the House did, I sit back and I think, you don't need to convince me or anyone that TikTok is bad. China is bad. I don't have it on my phone. That's not the debate. The debate is, what are we doing with our data and who's taking it? And for me, I saw the result 2 days ago as the cure that the House came up with is worse than the disease. They're trying to break the linkage between China and TikTok, which is a problem we need to tackle, but we don't do it at the expense of our First Amendment rights. They essentially gave the president broad powers
over the whole internet.
At his discretion. I mean, what's to say? We should pause when we see the president of the United States say, I'll pass it as soon as it gets to my desk. But he doesn't even know what's going to get to his desk.
You have to read the bill. You have to vote for the bill to know what's in it. That type of mentality.
The Senate still has to take it up. So it's not even halfway done yet.
That is very true. I mean, It is scary when you think about it, because it does remind me of someone said this joke, but they said our government said, we don't want you spying on the people that we want to spy on.
Well, right now, our data is the most valuable resource in the world. Your data is worth everything.
Yeah.
So I hear, they want to ban TikTok. I don't like the word ban. I mean, I'm an American citizen. I choose not to have TikTok. I also choose not to be on Instagram that often, but my data is not even mine. I would love a bill that says private companies have to pay you if they use your data. That's what I would like. So just like a royalty, I get a check every time somebody uses my data to sell on an email. Could you imagine? The American people, oh, hell, they'd be a lot more careful.
What would our
with what they
economy
did with
look
your,
like? That'd be
with
a
your
wild.
data.
Like a patent. I mean, your idea is patented. It's protected.
It's
if someone
you.
else uses it, you get
It's
the
your
royalties.
likeness.
Yeah.
It's your
That's a great idea.
private information. Why is there not a bill out there that pays everyone for the data they're collecting? And Google would have to pay.
You know
because
why?
Lobbyists in DC have made sure there's never going to be one.
The only people that won this week, and now as the Senate takes it up for debate, the only people that will win there are the lobbyists for TikTok and Facebook.
Now,
and Meta.
If China's using data to infiltrate our young people and what they say, and then the hypocrisy of government employees can't use data or use TikTok, but the president can use TikTok for a Super Bowl ad. It's constant hypocrisy from the elites.
Yes.
Good for thee, but not for me.
Yes.
And to get to a couple of these, because I don't want to miss O'Malley says we need to shrink the government. Dean Adams is watching. Hi, Dean. She wants to know if you listen to Jesse Kelly. Do you follow Michael Yon? And who would you like to see as governor?
Yeah, I don't know.
Jesse Kelly's a podcaster. Michael Yon, interesting guy. He is an ex-Green Beret as well, who's now a journalist who he's known for doing a lot of work in Japan, Hong Kong, China-related work, but lately he's been hanging out down at the Darien Gap in Panama, paying attention to the crossings that are coming across there and reporting on
Y-O-N, Michael Yon.
Yeah. Okay.
And Fred says exceptional 3-lens process. And O'Malley says, I think we're well past the infringement of the Bill of Rights, slippery slope, egregious. And I also want to know about this damn Patriot Act. And it was Republicans who brought it in, and it was all brought in under fear. And Obama said it was a joke, and it was against our civil rights, and it was terrible till he got in, and then he expanded it into the huge. I mean, we have the facility, where the NSA is spying on Americans, and now it's even getting more intrusive into our private lives. I mean, I play on Activision. I play Call of Duty, and right there before you start playing, Activision says, we are monitoring every one of your private chats. You will be suspended or you will be kicked off of the platform if you do this, and this. You can't appeal it and you can't fight it. So if someone accuses you of something, you pretty much just lost the hundreds of dollars you spent over the years in this site. And I get that. That's a private business. But the software to be able to listen in, I mean, they're not intrusive. What about the Fourth Amendment? I mean, our government can legally break the Fourth Amendment every day.
And they do. Yeah. Senator Lee called that out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not even in potential terrorism now. They've got air marshals have been following around people that were in DC in January. They weren't even at the Capitol. They were probably visiting wherever in DC, getting followed around by our air marshals. And meanwhile, the people who protect our federal buildings are catering to the immigrants that are at the border. And yet, where's our national security? And why are you so focused on domestic terrorism when there's real terrorism outside those walls just flooding in?
Yes. Yeah. Where do you want me to begin?
I want you to fix it. So fix it.
Hey,
How do
well,
we
there's-
fix it?
and the choice our constituents have is leadership, judgment, and accountability. Who are you looking to that can bring that to represent our second district? Who's going to fight for you as a patriot and a warrior on not only national level issues, but for our water and our land? You can bet I'm going to fight for that. You can bet I'm going to go to the BLM and jerk their funding and get their attention and make sure they're not.
He said Bureau of Land Management, folks, just so that you don't get confused and tomorrow you have a picketing line out in front of your house.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Bureau of
Hey,
Land,
do you
thank
want to? I know Celeste has got the specialty when it comes to environmental, and she's fought for cities like St. George and for Twilla County, and she was doing that well before. She does have that specialty for rural communities and the federal lands and water rights and things like that. Where do you see yourself as far as federal lands as an issue for District 2? And all of us, I mean, our county is 88% owned by the federal government.
Yeah.
So we have to grow up, not out. And we aren't paid fairly for the land of PILT, which is not promised. It's given to us like a gift that we've earned somehow, or they may not give it to us. It could be pulled. That's payment in lieu of taxes for anyone that doesn't know that. And it's cents, pennies on the dollar. Cities like Wendover, Utah they're blocked in by BLM land. They cannot expand. Families have to separate. Their own kids can't live and work where they grow up unless they live in the Nevada side. And even then, it's still pretty dense what's available over there. So where do you see you could help as far as for our federal lands?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because that is a key question. Look, there will be no daylight between me and the work that's already been done. Of course, I'm going to fight for our water and our land. Of course, I'm going to do that. There's no question that will happen. The question is, who can you trust to do it? Who has that leadership, that expertise, that accountability, the ability to actually fight at the federal level to keep the Bureau of Land Management and other federal overlords out of our backyard? So, for example, we were in Kanab just a couple weeks ago, and two of the county commissioners were in town, and they were talking to us about how the BLM had come in and carved out a new wilderness study area, a WSA, and that county had no input into that. They were now all of a sudden
grown.
They were all just now fenced off, lost access, lost control. So for me, I ask, if we are doing such great work battling for our land and water, why is this still happening at the federal level?
Why are we doing studies on how Mormon beetles mate and then cannibalize? Like, why are shrimp on a treadmill? Why are we funding this crap?
Yeah.
Why are we funding this crap?
So I go back to your question. If she has already been working on this for years, why is it still a problem? Why are we still getting our lunch taken by the federal government? I respect the results that have happened, but we've got to do better. And you've got to ask yourself, where's the leadership been on this issue? What kind of leadership do you want going forward? Who's going to be that fighter, that warrior that's going to be the final barrier between the federal government and you? Who's going to make sure that the county commissioners have the decision space they need to do what's best for us? That's not the federal government. And you need a warrior, you need a fighter who can fight that fight and keep them out of our backyard.
Well, to be fair, Celeste has only been in office for 4 months, 5 months.
But she's had 4 years of working on this as well before.
Would you say then that Chris Stewart did not fight? I mean, do you see that you could do a better job than Chris Stewart did?
No, I'm not besmirching his work at all. I'm sure there were victories along the way. I've seen the good that has come from that. I'm just saying there's going to be no daylight from the success we've had before.
I can appreciate that. I also know that it's hard when it's one person and the county in Salt Lake and the representative in Summit, all different issues. Water is something we all have. It's Utah,
sure.
We're the desert, but federal lands, Utah, were owned by the federal government, and west or eastern states can't even fathom it. They can't fathom what it's like. I mean, maybe 3% of some states, but we're out here in the West and we're 80, I think overall 82% federal government. And when we talk about getting our lands back, a lot of people get in their heads that we're going to have oil rigs on every single, in canyon lands.
Just where there's oil, people.
Well,
and even there, they have directional drilling that can get to it. Yeah.
In directional drilling, my brother's a driller. He can go in, drill a place, and he can leave, and you never know they're there. And there's fracking, and we need refineries here, and we also need to be able to refine oil and actually sell oil out of the United States, bring that home, sell it outside the United States. But the United States, the American people should benefit off of that. We should get the cheapest gas in the world because we should have it. I'm not saying don't drill on our federal lands. You don't have to drill in canyon lands or in these special
unless there's
parks. Oil. But even then, go under it.
I'm pretty basic.
But a lot of people don't know how vast Tooele County's ground is. We're the second largest county in the state. It is so much BLM land, and we've got businesses out there. We should be putting cities out there.
And the Kennecott water problem, there's fights that need to be made there as well.
Those are fights that have been going on though for 2 decades.
I don't know if that's a fight that can be managed much on the federal level, but something that is federal is I'm a strong proponent of the 10th Amendment. And it feels like by the absorption of all of the sovereign duties by the federal government has put us at a precipitous place where we could collapse as a nation. And I think had the 10th Amendment been observed over this last 250 years, you might have states that fail, but those can be absorbed by a greater union. But if the whole nation fails, I need to go buy an ATV tire and fit it as a shoulder pad and get a dune buggy and,
What about the water rights when we add Utah, Arizona, California, Nevada, where a lot of our water is coming out of Utah, but we're not claiming all of it. California gets their taste.
Are
Nevada
those federal?
Theirs. Yeah. Is that a federal issue or is that a state's issue?
It's a little bit of both. The federal representative can work to keep the BLM in check, so that they're not overreaching or creating restrictions that our local leaders can no longer work reasonably within. And then I can work also with my counterparts, Arizona, California, making sure to keep them in check so that they look outward instead of upward to us. And I can support projects like here in St. George. The Water Conservancy District manager, they're focusing on all the water that's cleaned, and rather than just sending it down the Virgin River to California, let's put it in a new reservoir. Let's hold it here and have that water reuse.
Why doesn't California build reservoirs, especially in the rainiest season in forever? They count on Utah for water, and they're taking
it's
our
for
rights.
Communism. We can't do that for communism.
They've got this big blue thing to their west called the ocean. Why don't they start looking that way? Yeah.
It's true. If you're worried about water levels going up, then why aren't you getting salt out of there and using the ocean? It's insane. And all of this is insane. And O'Malley said, this is probably a reflection of a lot of people right now. I'm sorry, but I have a hard time believing we can save the Titanic, and I have a hard time believing we will even have an election. It's not that I won't continue to do as much as I can, but we're in a serious trouble in this country, and we're in late stage Rome. And I think that Jared is in the same mindset. It's like a black pill where we're going to just see how this crumbles, because we've got ourselves into such a pickle, and we've made kings out of politicians. And a lot of us, are working as hard as we can to try to get good people in there, hold them accountable. But so many people are just going to sit back and watch it burn, because it's going to take, if COVID didn't bring down the silent majority to make them actually mad enough to stand up, and the BLM riots didn't do it, and the election of 2020 didn't do it, or COVID especially, What is it going to take to wake America up and take their country back?
Well, let me share maybe a little story with you. I was at a town hall in Hurricane a couple weeks ago, and a woman was sharing similar frustration, and she literally asked me, why are you even in this? Where do you get hope from? Like, what gives you hope that you can even do any good? She was just genuinely like looking out for me. She's like, please don't do this to yourself. Like, what gives you hope?
Yeah.
Why would you want to do this? And she kept saying hope, and it triggered me, but in a good way, because it reminds me of my own daughter, our youngest daughter, Olivia. She was born 3 weeks before I went to Afghanistan for a year.
Wow.
And we knew, that she'd be born and I was going to leave. And so we named her Olivia Hope Jenkins in the hope that I would return, that I would be able to be her father, that I would survive that deployment, that combat deployment. And I did. And now 20 years later, she's now wearing the uniform. And when I am asked what gives me hope, well, one, I have my own literal hope in my family, my daughter, but the generation that she represents, she's one of about 900 cadets. And then across our nation, there's hope in that generation that's already raised their hand to support and defend our Constitution. And so for me, I want to fight so that they have leadership, that they have policy, they have funding, they have the resources they need that's worthy of their sacrifice. And so that's a little piece of why I'm in this race, and where I draw hope that ultimately in God we trust. In God we trust. We have to put our faith in what we put our hands over our heart and say. And that's what's going to carry me forward to hopefully earn your vote and be working for you.
Okay, that makes me emotional.
Yeah.
Because
Holly's going to have to take a minute. Okay, we've had someone ask, we have a lot of people out this way that aren't pleased with Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah.
If you're a gun rights advocate, Dan Crenshaw is Voldemort. And Dan Crenshaw isn't an overall negative on everything.
Oh, but he did the switch.
But he is, he didn't do the switch. He is
That's a good point.
a Bush era Republican. He's
Establishment.
He's a put America boots on every ground Republican. And there's a lot to be said about that. The United States, being a strong force in the world, has provided the world with this sense of security it's had for commerce for the last 40 years. I mean, essentially since about the time World War II ended, it really became, the world changed. The first time in known history that you had this ability to have world commerce at a safe level, where there wasn't state-sponsored piracy and all that. And we are drawing back from that. And I think we're drawing back from that because the people don't want to continue to financially support that when the rest of the world benefits and then calls us evil for it.
Yeah.
Which is also understandable. But Dan Crenshaw has supported a lot of big government restrictive plans. Red flag laws getting pushed through is the biggest one that comes to mind.
He's in Texas, right?
Yeah.
He pushed national red flag laws.
Oh, no. I just mean that's where he's out of, which is even more of a slap in the face to Texans, because
Texas is not the gun-loving place they like to claim. We had it first.
The county that he won is, and that's why, it was a shock. It's like he went to D.C. with one impression, and why it made such national attention when he started to talk red flag laws. Because my biggest argument, even Chris Stewart brought it up to a town hall here in Davis, because Davis County was very blue. And he said, and they wanted red flag laws. It was after a shooting. And he said, well, I'm willing to consider it. And I said to him, Chris, you can't imagine. Have you never been in a bad relationship? Have you never had anybody accuse you of something that's not true or false, that could hurt you because they hate you?
Yeah.
Red flag laws have so much opening for corruption, where an ex-girlfriend can get angry and accuse until someone's been tried and actually given a jury. And, if they're violent, of course we want to take their guns. If they're going to hurt themselves and they consent to hold their guns, or whatever, that's a different story. But it doesn't feel like those are the people who are causing problems with their guns. The people causing problems don't usually tell anybody, and they have mental illness, which needs to be addressed. And in my opinion, mental illness is the biggest problem facing Americans right now. And it's not getting better. It's getting worse. Now we're sitting down with people who are mentally ill and we're praising them for it. We're encouraging it. It's joined our military. It has in every branch of government. It's in everybody's workplace, and it's in every kid's school. And it's gotten out of control. And I wanted to say what made me emotional about what you just said is it's really, really hard in this day and age to get people to have hope, because what we see every single day is political theater, and we are dismissed. We are the unwashed masses who work our butts off from morning till night to be taxed from the second we are old enough to have a job to the well after we're into the ground. And people like you and people like my father and Jared, who served the country, are getting the shaft. They are getting mediocre health care. They are homeless. They are starving in this economy, and we aren't even taking care of them, let alone life has no value in this new generation. They're learning that a child in the womb is nothing but a clump of cells, could turn into a Volkswagen for all we know if you let it cook, and that our elderly are not valuable. And it's just so frustrating, because how do you defend it and try to give hope to people? And for my job, I have to, because if what I'm doing means nothing and there's no point in it, then I'm sacrificing so much for so little. So I appreciate the way you described that, because my why is my children and my parents and what they taught me. And I want a good future for my parents, and I want my children to be good stewards of this nation and to be patriotic just as much as I want my neighbor and even people that are Democrats or independents or whoever. I want God back in this country, and I want it to be unapologetic that we are doing this because it's the right thing to do, and not because we're greedy bastards who gain something. And so I appreciate that. I'm never emotional. I don't know if I've ever been emotional on the show. But
you mentioned your daughter in West Point, and that's her soft spot.
Yeah,
I dig it. So it says one of your priority bullet points is the Second Amendment. So how fast would you push to get rid of the NFA for me, please?
NFA.
Yeah, National Firearms Act.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I need to get smarter on that. So tell me what
the NFA. The NFA was written after the St. Valentine's Day massacre, where the guys got shot in the alley by Thompsons. Anyways, what it did is it's the act that restricts type of weapons you can own and all that. It's kind of a joke point, but I really want you to get rid of it.
Yeah,
I do, because that is what the ATF leans back on when they want to change a law. They'll read that NFA and say, where can we interpret this different than we did last week?
but this is what pisses me off, because you're not wrong, but the ATF has no business writing laws.
yeah.
They don't write them. They just
Interpreting. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yes.
They are bureaucrats. They're not elected. There is one body that is to do those laws. And people in agencies like the ATF, FBI, they write their own. And then they turn Americans into felons overnight by these.
Yeah.
And yet we're supposed to go, oh, it's fine. It's fine.
I mean, I haven't mentioned guillotines yet on the show.
What
We're an
time is
hour and 10 minutes
Hour
into
and
it.
10 minutes in. He mentions a guillotine in every episode. It's like, oh,
I
Take
can
him
gosh,
out
have
to
a
the-
little
you
Take
should
'em out.
have it
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
out front.
I have a little toy guillotine I even play with sometimes. But anyways, but no, Second Amendment, like what's your stance on that? What would you, I mean, let's go with the reality we live in right now, not Jared's dreamland. What would you go there and fight for Second Amendment wise right now?
So just getting back to Dan Crenshaw, I want to address that. So
yes.
An important difference to know there right off the bat. He's a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
I'm a Green Beret. That's enough said.
Enough said.
When there's a spotlight anywhere in the room, those Navy SEALs will go to the spotlight.
You mean you haven't wrote a book about your latrine duty in 03 yet?
Did you do that?
No, that's inside Army Navy jokes.
Yes.
The Navy, if a Navy SEAL gets sent to the NEX to buy, toilet paper for their bunkhouse, he writes a book about it. The Green Beret a Green Beret will go and halo jump onto enemy territory, come home, and shut the F up. Yes. And that's the difference.
Hey, there was a movie called Green Beret.
Sure.
But it was John Wayne.
Yeah, it was John Wayne, and it was written.
Missed John Wayne.
And it was written. The original story was written by a journalist who went through jungle warfare school during Vietnam. He was invited there by a colonel in the Green Berets he was friends with, and the colonel said, "You want to come see what I do?" And invite him there. And up until I want to say 88, that journalist was the oldest person to ever pass jump school.
No kidding. He
It's
passed.
just interesting, weird history.
Good trivia.
He was a famous journalist. I think the same guy, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
He knows way too much about history. So
but go on.
He loves history.
So just to put a bow on the Dan Crenshaw piece, he was the last member of Congress that spoke on the TikTok ban. He was the one that closed out the debate, and he basically told everyone, if you don't pass this, then you're supporting China. And I just shook my head and said, pump the brakes, brother. Why don't we worry about our First Amendment first?
Yeah. It's a tough argument, right? It is, because China is an abusive spyware that China has.
It is. Yeah, we're not debating that.
But we don't know what spyware is involved in Google or Facebook or any of these others.
We'll be getting to Google in a minute. Don't you dare bring that out yet, because I want to drop that bomb on her. But what I want to say is, do we want to encroach on people's First Amendment? That's a First Amendment done. They're giving up their information voluntarily.
Right.
Do we want to encroach on their ability to do that?
Or their ability to not do it. I mean, it's still free to own TikTok.
And that's where I'm at. And aside from the law giving the president powers to do anything else, I lean towards an absolutist on the First Amendment. I think it's the most important one. Yeah.
And one key thing to remember in this debate is we don't defeat China by acting like China.
Amen.
That's why we're different. That's why we're different. We don't take detainees and do, we're Americans for a reason. And when the government says national emergency, we got to hurry and do this. We need more power, special powers, trust us. Then we should pump the brakes and say, I don't think so. And that's what happened with this that we saw. Everyone rushed to, how come it all of a sudden came to a head magically? It's national, and the president says, I'll sign it. Well, like Senator Lee said, he said, when we see the government claim national emergency, need more powers, then we should all be suspect.
We should be terrified because we saw our economy get destroyed when it was 15 days. What was that? 3 years ago? 4 years ago today.
Spread, yeah. Wow,
15 years. Or 15 days became years.
Yeah.
And though Trump wanted to open at every turn, Fauci was stabbing him in the back. His own people were stabbing him in the back. He was getting terrible information and watched his economy, just a beautiful economy, start to go down the tubes. And now we've got the left who gets to argue that they have the best economy ever and all these jobs they've created. And we've got the lowest unemployment rate. And I'm like, you guys started from negative and now you're boosting.
You're almost back to zero.
Yeah, you're almost back to, inflation is down.
Yeah.
Inflation that you caused is down, but it's still not where it was before you. I mean, we're living in a clown world. and you want to go up to the circus and you want to juggle and ride the unicycle with these clowns. And I'm very impressed, but I'm also thinking you've got to be insane. Your wife has got to think you are insane. It's probably more scary to do this than it is to go on a tour.
All great points. One thing that really was my tipping point for me to get in the race. I saw last year's process. I saw Chris Stewart step down. I saw the special and how it produced what it did. And I thought, we've got to do better. And as I was chewing on that, one of my mentors, a Green Beret retired guy, I was talking to him and he said, Colby, no one else is coming. No one else is coming. He just kept saying that. He's like, no one else is riding over the hill on a white horse to save the day. No one else is coming. So who's going to do it? Who's going to do it for you? And he just kept pressing me. He's like, no one else. And you as a veteran, as a combat veteran, having served our nation, who needs to do it? He just kept saying that. And I was like, you're right. If I can't sit on the sidelines and go to this year's state convention and then be kicking myself thinking, man, I have no one but to blame but myself. So that was what got me off the seat, if you will. But Jared,
Yeah.
I owe you an answer on the Second Amendment.
Yes.
Back to that example, the umbrella. If I'm negotiating off of the Constitution and I'm outside of that protective umbrella, then I'm wrong. And just the name red flag, that's just wrong.
You should throw up red flags, right?
Yeah, that's just wrong. Guns have always been guns. It's the people that have changed. But to your point, we can't just go after and start flagging people and saying you don't have this right anymore, or we're diminishing your right as a government. That's not what the founders intended. And so, I would fight for our gun rights all day long.
Yeah, but the world has changed. So we've entered new dimensions. Now, obviously, when they wrote it, they had dealings with cannons and privately owned naval to that level, naval warships and cutters.
They were also fighting with illegal guns.
But nowadays, we've entered a different era with, I guess, mass casualty type weapons, NBC stuff, things like that. And so it does cause even someone like me, who is a purist and absolutist, to go, okay, wait a second. But then you remember the cost of dealing with any of those things. And I don't know, it becomes tough. I do understand why it's a hard to broach subject.
One idea I would offer to consider is, we know the bad guys are going to always get their guns, no matter what we do. So let's stop focusing on taking guns from good people, and let's focus on how we can harden our most precious belonging, if you will, our children. And look at how we focus on protecting our money. If you walk into a bank, how many guards do you see? How many vaults are there? How many armored trucks are there that protect our money? But if you go to your kid's elementary school, what do you see? Nothing. Maybe the doors are locked. Maybe the doors are locked. Maybe you've got a security guy that's, a retired guy, not even armed. So I'm not saying we put more guns in our school, but let's look at our priorities. If that's what it's going to take.
Our priorities are in Ukraine right now.
Have you ever?
And if we took that money alone and re-secured our schools and actually had retired veterans, retired police officers, we have better security systems, automatic door locks. The money that has been spent, hundreds of billions has been spent in Ukraine, and yet we couldn't even give $5 billion to secure the border. We couldn't even get, $1 billion to go across schools nationwide and say,
what were the numbers on that bill they tried pushing
school
across? So it was
$100 billion's already lost.
It was 140
billions coming.
It was 140 million for Ukraine.
No, billion.
This was written as a secure the border bill, and it broke down to 140 billion for Ukraine, or 140 million for Ukraine, whatever.
I think it was 100 billion, and then 60 billion went to Ukraine.
90 billion to Israel, and then it was like 15 for the border, and it was written, the headline was that little tiny number down
the border secure bill.
I was like, you guys are crackheads.
Well, it's the opposite of whatever the bill title is. Now, let's get into bills like that, the omnibus spending bills. Those come across Congress, and threatening to shut down the government is always an issue. And I think if the American people stopped getting scared of that, because Social Security still gets paid, military is supposed to get paid. I think non-essentials get paid after the bill's done, but
Back pay.
I know
I've been in a government shutdown. Yeah.
And Obama, remember the government shutdown that he blamed on Ted Cruz during his service, and then actually hired people to go secure and close down national monuments that are open air, the World War II monument in DC, to put orange tape up and not let these World War II veterans go see their monument. It was absolutely
They closed down Gettysburg. My dad, who's never leaves Utah, he goes out to visit my brother in Maryland at the time. He's a recruiter out there. And he's like, hey, we'll take the 4-hour drive over and see Gettysburg. My dad's a huge Civil War buff. Gettysburg is, if you've been there, you don't see any park rangers. It's just kind of an open area. And they had walled it off.
That's what the World War II thing. It's in the mall. You walk through it. You can sit at the fountain there. Mm-hmm. There's no doors or entry. It's just part of a walk. But he went out of the way. Now, they have so many strings tied to this. There's a lot of pork. There's a lot of funding Ukraine or whatever tied to these bills. And then there's the threat of shutdown. How would you vote on those? And honestly, you can answer you don't know, because a lot of times until that bill's in front of you, you won't know. But I guess what I'm asking is, are you prepared to vote in a way that means you will not get reelected if it means standing up for what you're running on now?
Yes, there's no other motivation. Honestly, I'm an old soldier. I'm not looking to make a career.
We're all the same age here, bro.
Yeah. I'm a young buck.
You're a young buck. Thank you.
If I vote or if I act contrary to my employer's wishes, then fire me. I don't want to be there. I shouldn't be there if that's happening. And so for me, I look at, the turmoil we had in changing the speaker, and now we have Speaker Johnson. I appreciate and support what he's trying to do. He's breaking the omnibus approach apart. He's saying, let's try to get back to some degree of regular order where we have 12 individual appropriations bills. We're not going to just vote up and down on the 3,000-page bill that Nancy Pelosi says we'll read it later. That's not okay. And so for me, passing a continuing resolution just enables the government to continue to kicking the can down the road and operating off of previous policy decisions. So for me, if I have to vote to shut the government down, I vote to shut the government down to get us back on track. Heaven forbid the government shuts down just for a week or two. Heaven forbid.
Well, why are we not back down to pre-COVID budgets? And why haven't we been able to make a budget in 20 years? And the problem is they're still using budget money from COVID. Like, we've had to spend all of this. Well, now we're not dealing with the same stuff. Why don't we back down to spending at least that? And now Biden wants to do a $5 trillion spending spree, if not 6. And by the way, his State of the Union, I told it last week, it's like being waterboarded for an hour. And he was so angry. So whatever juice they got him pumped up on before that speech made him an angry old man.
Or maybe he's always angry.
He's actually showing his colors as being angry. But you know what? It's our Congress's fault. They're the ones with the power of the purse, and they're not using it. And then if you do
declare war too. The war power.
Well, not in this generation. I mean, now it's like the president can.
That's my next question.
Under Obama, he could drop drone strikes on American citizens if he wanted in other countries without Congress. And this has just kind of gotten ignored. And now it's just, hey, we do what we want and you're tough. It's absolutely off the rails. The train is off the rails.
That's one of my next questions. As a combat veteran, what are your thoughts on, Okay, hardest question. This one that probably would be hard to answer for anyone who'd been there. But what are your thoughts on the anti-terrorism wars we experienced through the early 2000s? Do you think that they were justified? Do you think that they were a good use of our young men and women?
So the initial response is yes, to go in and unseat the Taliban, which was our mission, but to stay and transition to nation building, that's not the business.
Why was let me dig in on that. Why was unseating the Taliban our mission?
Because ultimately they were providing safe haven for Al Qaeda, for the the terrorists that launched 9/11. Now there are other threads that you can pull as to what was Saudi Arabia's role in that, what was Pakistan's role in that, but making sure that they no longer had that safe haven from which they could attack us was what we intended to do.
Do you think unseating the Taliban would have restricted Al Qaeda's ability to operate there?
It did initially. It just pushed them away, though, pushed them into Pakistan. And so once
did it push them away because we were there, or because we unseated the Taliban? That's my question.
That's a chicken before the egg. That's a great question.
And did that create ISIS because we were there? Did ISIS grow because we had a different commander in chief?
I honestly think had they just called up the QRF, called up the Ranger Battalion, and went over there and let those guys do some field training practices on ground, and then brought them home, we'd had a much better effect over long term.
Which is what we did initially. I mean, there were special forces teams that came in out of our base in K2, south from Turkey over the mountains, and then we had a Ranger Battalion that jumped into Kandahar and seized Kandahar. But then it just grew way beyond the scope for 20 years that it should have been. And so, 20 years of mistakes, not the fault of those who were there fighting.
Not at all. No, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this right now. The soldiers who fought in Afghanistan and Iraq they have been through the meat grinder, and it's a meat grinder that, I mean, we're going to see the aftermath of it. Just like we did with Vietnam, we're going to roll out. We're starting to see it now because the guerrilla warfare is a different animal, and we keep trying to go in there and bolster a nation. And they're going to take democracy. Yeah, I get it. They're Stone Age last week. Next week they'll be
and it's absolutely against their religion, and you're going to change these people's very core.
But our young men and women paid that ultimate price for that, and it's a travesty. And it almost, look, I'm not a fan of Bush. I'm not a fan at all. I'm thinking Bush, when he gets to hell, will get the ultimate treatment.
Yeah, they'll find those weapons of mass destruction there.
But because
it's very profitable.
Because Dr. Ron Paul called it. Why are we going over there? To go over there. When I say we drop, we kick butt, and we leave, I mean the airplanes don't shut the engines down. The helicopters, they land, go in, kick butt, back on the bird home. We don't even have to pack a lunch. That's what I'm saying.
You mean shock and awe, and then we leave?
Yeah. Shock, and then the next morning they go, that's what I mean.
How you expect to rebuild a nation, especially how you expect to fund the rebuilding of the nation.
And Afghans got a notorious history of shutting some stuff down.
Yes.
Because let's face it,
the empires. Yeah.
They are the toughest human beings on earth because they live in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
They're not tough because of genetics or whatever. They live where you have to be tough to live. That's where they live. That's how they live.
Yeah.
I mean, they shut down the Brits twice. They shut us down. They shut
the Russians.
The Russians. They shut down Alexander the Great. He owned everywhere else. And he's like, I can't play here.
Yeah.
They should have told us something.
Yes.
Well, what do you think? I mean, war is one hell of a machine, and it does profit. It does make a lot of profit for the elites who are invested in it. I know Trump was more focused on at home, securing the United States, but also bringing the military back to what it was pre-Obama, pre-Bush even, like actually filling our coffers, having our reserves, rebuilding the Navy, just a lot of filling in and making us strong at home.
Yeah.
Do you see us doing that again?
So I love what Trump did recently in the last few weeks. Now I may say it differently than him, but I love what he did with our NATO allies. He said, look, you guys aren't paying up. You never have. You probably never will. So when that balloon goes up and Russia's knocking on your door, we may not be there. Now we're not going to leave our alliance, but he's putting them on notice. He's demanding accountability. And for me personally, even though my daughter's raised her hand and she'll go fight and win, I don't want her going and dying in Ukraine while the French and the Germans are home having their tea and sitting on their rear ends. Our allies need to own those problems. We need to support to some degree, but we don't own the problems in their backyard. We're an ally for a reason. We're not the 911.
You are so insensitive, sir.
I'm concerned about that NATO alliance anyway, because what happens if, let's just say, crazy notion, because we have a couple of NATO alliances with some, let's just say, less than savory individuals. I'm thinking Erdogan.
Yes.
Who's to say Erdogan might pop off and kick something off somewhere over there? And then what? We're Article 5'd into a war that a madman started?
Yeah.
John Quincy Adams warned us against doing this, and we marched headlong into it.
Yeah.
Well, George Washington as well. And when it began with the French in England, it's we need to stay out of this. We can't get in everybody's wars.
Yeah. And I'm not a defender. I'm not a defender of Putin by any means, but he kept telling NATO and us, if you put missiles in Ukraine, if you push them on my border, then that's my red line. And when he puts a red line down, he actually acts. So I'm not defending him at all, but I'm just saying we pushed his buttons and he responded.
Yeah.
And now here we are.
Not to defend Obama, but also his red line was a couple 100 miles away, where Obama's was an ocean away.
Obama's was more like a pink line that if the wind blew wrong, it would move.
Well, Obama's red line got shut down by us, by the American citizens.
Yes,
it got shut down on social media. Because when he said the red line, social media lit up and said, no, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. You can't commit us to another BS war where we send young men and women over to get traumatized and killed.
And I see one comment, we must hit them back much harder. So like right now we have little outposts speckled throughout Syria and Iraq that are just getting death by 1,000 cuts right now. And those are our troops. So if we're going to put troops out there, if we're going to do it, then we better do it. We better defend
go
them.
big or go
we better
home.
have a deterrent. Right now they're just getting pinpricked to death in our president that we do strikes on empty warehouses. I mean the Houthis of all people are owning the Red Sea, and what response have we provided that stopped it? So,
would you recommend that the United States stopped being the world's policeman and maybe close the bases in Germany, South Korea? I mean, we've got bases everywhere. Like you said, we're spread out all over. Would you be down to bring everyone home, maybe put our troops on our own borders and just kind of lock it down? Or do you think we've already established being leaders of the free world and fighting for the little guy? Like, how do we fix this? Because we shouldn't be rebuilding communities. And I don't know where our money's going in Ukraine because someone's audited it.
And it's coming back to think blue and the big guy. It's
going back into the economies because a lot of these government officials of Ukraine are now considered elites. They're extremely wealthy. And I don't know how their soldiers are surviving. And I don't know if guns are even getting to them. But if I'm Putin, I'm looking at the United States funding this war and I'm going, I'm losing a generation of young men because the Americans stepped in. If that's not an act of war, I don't know what is. The fact that we're funding all of this and then we're browbeating the Europeans for not jumping in and paying more against this and putting more into Ukraine. And I'm just like, where does it end? How do we stop it now?
Yeah.
Does it mean pulling all the troops back and taking care of the homeland? Or do we only go with NATO members who have actually paid? Like how do we fix this?
I think we certainly requires our revisit for sure. But my approach and my thought is America is what it is because our fight for our security should always be an away game. We don't ever want to have our fight for security be a home game.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean we're in everybody's backyard, but there's a reason we're in Germany from World War II, in Japan, in South Korea. There's a reason that we have these strategic footholds that are solid. They're not getting pinpricked to death like we are in Syria and Iraq right now. There's a reason that we have a presence abroad so that we can always maintain our security as an away game and never a home. If we just withdrew and became just totally with our head in the sand here, then that fight's going to find us. And with an open border, it's already too late. We don't even know what's in our borders right now. That's just a ticking time bomb.
I think it is a ticking time bomb right now, with federal buildings not being protected, with the airways not being protected. As I mentioned earlier, the very people meant to protect your air travel and your federal buildings, they're moved elsewhere. And I don't know if it's by design, but this open border policy for the last 3.5 years, it does feel like we're in a ticking time bomb. And when it's going to happen and where it's going to happen, and then what state of emergency will our president declare that will take more of our freedoms? And I can only imagine what it would look like if we moved all our military back home under the guise of, hey, we're not going to be the world's savior anymore, but we are going to be on the borders. Are we losing freedoms, or are we getting more? Like that first outline you said, am I voting for more freedom or less? Yeah. Do we have more freedoms when we are all over the world than if we're at home? Because they'd have to protect, I mean, they would be soldiers on home field. And America's not designed to have our military on home field. You know, being military within our country, you're absolutely right. We should be playing away games.
Well, just imagine let's pretend you're a special forces captain and you're giving your 5-paragraph op order prior to deployment. And you tell your guys, there is no per diem on this one. But what we're doing is we're infiltrating their country. And then when you get there, you're going to sign up for all of their welfare programs. And what this is going to do is it's going to be your per diem. So you're going to get housing, because that's what China's doing to us right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most Chinese coming across are getting free housing and a credit card
and
paid for by us.
And amazingly, they come across and they're clean shaven. They haven't been in the jungle for weeks.
No, tell them what you noticed.
The pipeline.
And
through the pipeline.
Yeah. And the Darien Gap, that rough area, that's their Marine Corps basic training crucible. You know, that last 2 weeks of their basic training.
Yeah, they're military.
They make it through their Darien Gap, and then they hold a graduation in southern Mexico and kick them on north.
Well, Jared said that in one of the border videos you watched, it was the Chinese kids, guys walking across. They're in their own tent.
They have their own
security.
They have their own compound down there, just on the north side of the Darien Gap. The Chinese do, and
Which
the Chinese
drug cartels aren't afraid of them. Afraid of them.
The Darien Gap is a piece of jungle they couldn't even build the America's road through. It's a tough area, and on the north side of that, the Chinese have their own compound. Everyone else just kind of mingles in this crap hole. But the Chinese have built a compound.
And the drug cartels are a big threat to everyone else.
Drug cartels aren't going to touch them. Then shut their fentanyl off.
Exactly. Yep. China gives them the precursors. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. So we've talked. Tell us more again about how you're going to.
I want to dig through your website.
Our federal lands, because that's a huge issue in Tooele County. I'm sure it is in St. George. You guys have grown ridiculously. Now Tooele County is one of the #1 growing counties in the state, whereas Washington County was for a really long time. And I'm curious, what do you see? What do you see the Congress can do where federal lands is concerned? Because it is a state's issue we've got to take up with the Supreme Court. Oh, and do you have anybody you endorse for governor? And what are your thoughts on that? Because a good governor is who's going to get us our state lands, to be honest.
Yeah, who we have to be partners with. Yeah, I'm just through this cycle, I've been getting to know Phil Lyman, and I really, really like him. I love his stand. I love his courage, and I love how he's a constitutionalist. And
he took on the BLM too.
Yes, he did. I've seen his mugshot for sure.
In a hard way.
So
are you running a convention caucus only, or are you gathering signatures?
I'm doing both. Okay. And the reason for that is I've been a precinct chairman. Was a state delegate before. My wife's our secretary treasurer for our precinct. We know and appreciate the caucus process, and that's my campaign's primary focus. But given this system that Utah has that allows for signatures, you as the delegates, as the voters, should expect and demand of me that I get to the finish line using every legal means possible. And that's what we're going to do. We're not going to go into the fight leaving one weapon at home.
I personally hate that, but I understand it because it's the game, it's the rules that I believe the establishment Republicans created.
Yes.
It costs campaigns a lot of money. And sometimes it makes delegates irrelevant.
Yeah,
and
Phil Lyman has said similar. He's doing similar. If we're going to change it, we've got to beat it.
We need to change it through our legislators, and we need bravery in our Utah state legislation to go, we're done. We're done with this. But of course, we're not going to do that.
They're too worried about protecting their calendars right now.
Well, and when we have a primary and somebody wins by 36%, that's upsetting. But I'm curious, how many signatures do you have to gather?
For the House seat, it's 7,000. The state ones are a lot more, but for the
like yours,
US House,
for you,
7,000 is what
7,000. So are you doing that on your own, or do you have to pay a company?
Both.
Yikes. Yeah. So that's expensive. So let's get to your website, because I'm sure you have a donate button on there for people who believe in you and want to donate. As a party chair, I'm sad that you have to play the game this way, but I can't say, I would be lying if I haven't mentioned folks that when they've been coming to me and they want to run for office. In the past, I've told them to do the dual path so they get secured in both areas. I know that it's smaller though in my county. You have to get like 400 signatures, and I know they don't pay money for those. They go to 400 people and get 400 people to believe in them. And that's not an easy feat, and I don't discount those signing. I just hope that you, as this candidate, have really, really informed the people gathering signatures on your behalf of what you stand for, what you believe in, so they can actually let the people know getting signatures who they're voting for. But as a party chair, I don't exist without the caucus convention system. So, rude, but I get it.
I have a big question.
Yeah.
All right. You ready? So you worked for the evil empire Google.
Oh, here we go.
Tell us about that.
Yeah.
We're on ColbyForUtah.com is what you're looking at. I don't know who this dude is.
We're looking at the surfer bro picture you got there with the beard and the messy hair.
Surfer bro, I haven't heard that. Yeah.
That's what you look like.
What's up, dude?
Like
that picture was actually taken after about 8 days in combat, and we got back to our fire base, and we had no power. And our water came from the riverbed. Like, we pumped it from the water, put it in a tank.
Oh my gosh.
And we had no power to get water. And so
how old are you in that picture?
Oh boy. I'm in my late 30s, probably mid 30s.
Wow. It reminds me when my dad was undercover and he had this long beard, and he came to one of my parent teacher conferences. He looked like a homeless person. And the teacher had never met him before. She's like, are you okay? Is this guy bothering you? I'm like, oh my gosh, every day. But, he was undercover and he had to look this way, but with the long scraggly beard and the long hair. So that's really funny. And it's ColbyForUtah.com. And, check out the website. I'm sure Jared's going to share it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's already in the show notes.
There is a donut. I wish. I would love a donut button. There's a donate button, and I'm sure that Colby appreciates if you can't afford to financially contribute, and you believe in him, and you really want to help get him some exposure, he'll appreciate volunteers, I'm sure, and making phone calls and maybe gathering signatures, which I hate. But he's actually get to know him, get on the site, read what his issues are. If we haven't covered them, contact him. I'm sure you're available because you have nothing but time on your hands
reading the
during
issues
campaigning.
was for Holly's half of the audience. My half of the audience, the issues get announced in grunts tomorrow afternoon. Anyway, so tell us about Google.
Yeah, so thanks for asking. So I've been working in DC for almost 9 years at being the Green Beret liaison and legislative director in the Pentagon, and I'd had enough of government. And I had a friend that actually got hired out at Facebook, and she was saying, man, and she came from the Pentagon too. She said, it's a different world. You need to come out to the corporate world and get away from the bureaucracy. And so I just started interviewing around with different companies, and Google hired me to be a program manager for Google Fiber in Florida. So I wasn't a telecoms guy by any stretch, but they just needed a manager. They needed a leader to literally open the office, get people hired, start interacting with the engineering firm, and start building relationships with the local county officials and state. And then the experts, the telecom experts, would come in and help build the actual fiber backbone and so forth. And so that went on for a little while. And then Google realized, we don't build the internet, we're on it. And so they actually, less than a year into my job, there's still some Google Fiber markets out there, but less than a year into that job, they shut down Florida. So I lost my job. Like, we moved, started my kids in school, and here I was out of job. But to Google's credit, they said, hey, we know we're putting all of these teams, all of these markets under tremendous, we just axed you all, but we're going to give you opportunity and time. If you want to stay with Google, we'll help you find a new home. And so I did. I needed the job, and so I got hired to actually go to work at Google headquarters in California. And I worked a little bit in cyber policy because I'd had some cyber defense and offensive work in the Pentagon doing legislative work, but ultimately found myself in helping build product teams. My Google directors, as they started to get to know me and my experience, they said, man, you're a leader. You've led.
They found out what a Green Beret's job is.
Yeah, and that's why they hired me initially. Build teams and help us make good teams do good things. And so when I got to headquarters, they said, we need you and your team to help stand up new teams, get the teams going, and then when a team is done, help them dissolve and find new homes. So I started with really the team building function of product development.
Wait, can I interject? I got a question, because when you say Google, I picture DEI like ridiculous.
Yeah.
What's that like, going into a software company in Silicon Slopes, basically?
What color did you dye your
Valley?
hair for this?
Yeah, what was that like? Did you have all these snowflakes traumatized by a military man?
Yeah. Well, the beauty of being a Green Beret is you have to understand your operational environment. Like, when I was in Afghanistan, I was working with tribal mullahs. When I was in Colombia, I was working with grumpy Colombian colonels. When I was I went from the Pentagon. My last boss in the Pentagon was a 4-star admiral. My first boss at Google was an openly gay female lesbian. So talk about one end to the other. So I had to learn how to function in different environments, but not compromise on who I am. And it was interesting. When people say, what's it like to work at Google? That when I went to Google headquarters, one of the first times I went into the men's bathroom, used the bathroom, washing my hands, and there's a little basket there, and it had feminine hygiene products, and I'm thinking,
because you don't want your.
Did I go in the wrong one?
Exactly.
Oh, no.
Here's me, the good old Mormon boy from small town Utah, and I literally was like, crap, I went into the wrong bathroom. I gotta get out of here.
I gotta sneak out quick. Sneak out. No one saw me.
It would have never dawned on me that there would be a tampon in a men's bathroom. So I had to. Yeah, it was not ideal. And once
you probably got to know some incredible people.
I did,
and
for sure.
you get to know the people rather than. I bet you were not what they expected either. They probably expected you to be a judgy Mormon military guy who hated everyone, and yet you were probably inspiring and kind and encouraging, and you got them to follow on a common ground, like, hey, let's be a success. And I mean, that's what good leaders are. They're not judging that you're gay or that you're trans. What they're doing is getting the best out of you and using that to prop up a team.
Yes.
Rather than shine a light on you because you're gay or because you're trans. That's not what you're about. You're more than that. It's more depth in that.
I'll bet Google learned a lesson when they hired you to go to Florida, because for a special forces commander, that sounds like that's like a job that's written for your skill set. To go in, for everyone who's listening, Green Berets are war fighters, yes, but they are not. Green Berets are war fighter trainers, and they particularly go to a foreign country and they find a group of guys who don't like the bosses of that foreign country and teach them to fight and then lead them in that fight. But for you to go to Florida, compose a team, build a plan, build a system, that sounds like almost like that was textbook a job.
Yes.
I'm surprised. I'll bet Google looks for that now. If they ever go and open up a new space, they say, all right, I want you to find me all of the Green Berets you can, because they particularly know. All we got to do is train them, get an A team together. One guy knows how to set up phones. One guy.
Yes.
And seriously,
that's how it was.
That's what they do.
I love the A team.
And if I could, back to that first boss I talked about, she's still a great friend to this day. In fact, she's donated to the campaign, even though she's on the opposite spectrum of where I believe, because I had to build those relationships of trust. And she was actually a veteran as well and served our nation. And to your point, being empathetic and building respectful relationships doesn't mean you compromise on who you are.
Exactly.
You can still show respect and be empathetic. But once COVID hit, my wife and I looked at each other and thought, why are we still here in California?
Yeah.
And
did you leave before or after they filled the skate parks with sand?
Oh, I don't know, because that didn't happen.
Did you leave before COVID or after?
Right after. The gears were starting to turn a little bit. And then when it hit, because we've been coming to St. George for decades, visiting family and friends. And
I love St. George.
We bought some land here, and then it just became, we've got to find a job that will allow us to get here. And COVID helped us do that.
You know, some of the people I love most in this world are gay. And I think it's such a misconception. It's such a stereotype that Republicans hate gays. And for me, I think if you believe in God, you understand God does not make mistakes. And so for me, I love it when you have a friend, because it doesn't matter their sexuality. I don't walk around telling people mine. And when there's a common ground, whether it's a job, whether it's your principles, whether it's patriotism, that's what you should look for in the people you love, and loyalty and kindness. And I think great leaders will pull that out of people, regardless of who they sleep with, who they love. And I think that it's a beautiful thing. You and Google, it's crazy that you got through and you had to compromise nothing other than you just had to just kind of change focus. Instead of sending people to war, you're sending people to tech support.
What's your ride
but
to
you
the
did
death?
A takeover for sure, because Google has been #1 forever, right?
Was your ride to the Death Star comfortable?
To the Death Star.
To Google.
My ride.
That's Google gets a bad rap, and earnedly so.
Yeah. Not even talking about California. That's even worse.
Google's bad rap was their search algorithms during the last election. They've come out and openly admitted to what they've done, but Facebook also. And I think that's just a generational gap that's happening. I think that will level out after AI takes over and we're all slaves to the robots. So don't worry about it, guys. It'll go away soon.
Skynet.
Yeah, Skynet. I wanted to go over, but back to your website a little bit. I want to dig in a little more on that.
How much time do you have with us?
probably got to wrap up in a little bit. I'm trying to.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to go over on your website. We're
Remember,
talking
it's Colby at
Or Colby
Colby
Utah.
for that's spelled out for Utah.com.
Yep. And it's in the show notes. You can just go there. So on your issues, you've got national security, you've got life, and that's talking about the value of children, the value
of life total,
Yeah.
of adults, of grandparents. That's how I take it.
And if I mention anything here you want to hit on right now, we just want to give you a minute to kind of close out the show here.
Okay. Yeah.
Got the economy, it's doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah, the border we talked about. Yeah.
We're winning the border. Veterans.
Yeah, talked about that. That's
Yep.
Look forward to that fight.
Yeah, I think a lot of young men and women in this country look forward to you having that fight.
And a lot of kids of veterans look
Yeah.
forward to somebody taking on the VA and making it a better place.
Yep. Got the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Education. We didn't talk on education much, but you mentioned in here you want to give parents more rights and knowledge, and then you want to remove the critical race theory and woke initiatives that they're corrupting our children.
A key thing I see with education is parental sovereignty.
Mm.
Parents need to have. I have to fight at the federal level to make sure that the ability for parents to control what's being taught to their kids is under their control and not determined by federal bureaucrats in DC that are tying funding to those decisions. And I have family members who teach and who are longtime educators, and they're they're tired of not being teachers anymore. They're teaching to some arbitrary standard, and their funding's being tied to that. And these are in small schools in Utah. So
would you vote to get rid of the Department of Education?
If it meant that funding and that bureaucratic overhead goes away and it trickles down to us.
Well, it should go to the states. The states should be in charge of their own education, in my not so humble opinion.
Yeah, I don't like when politicians say, do away with the Department of Education, but they never followed up with, well, yeah, don't just reprogram that money to some other slush fund. It needs to go home. That funding and all that bureaucratic bloat needs to go away, and all that needs to be redirected home, back to Utah.
I don't like the Department of Education. I think it was a faulty arrangement to try to get reelected by Jimmy Carter, and it has failed, and it has ruined our education. Our education has not climbed in any measurable amount since they started. It's only dropped every year. Yeah. Limited government.
Yeah.
Talked about that. Joe Biden, I hear you can go carry him around. I don't know. Maybe Jim Henson.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know what? I think they're going for drugs because Jim Henson sadly has already passed, and they couldn't get Jim Henson to control him.
The Muppets. Yeah. Well, they're doing enough hair plugs though to make him look like he's gaining hair while I'm losing it. Amazing.
Oh, it's crazy, right? And do you think they're like before every show they got a guy that holds him right behind the ears and pulls back, and then they staple the loose skin to his face?
You can do that with tape now
because they keep tightening him right up.
Tape. Right up. Yeah. He takes orders from everyone else on his staff. Why not?
Have you seen the font on the teleprompter? Like you can get like one sentence out on that teleprompter. The font is so large, I can read it, and I need glasses when I'm reading.
It's like a learn to read book.
And then he just doesn't read it.
But
this is it. On the world stage, we're a joke.
Exactly.
And I'm done. And I know most of our viewers, the ones watching live and the ones that will watch later, you future people who are listening to the podcast or watching us somewhere, all of us are so sick and tired of the norm. We don't want someone to go to DC and become part of that swamp. We want people who are going to shake it up, even if it means they're only in office for one term. And that's something I'm always asking. Are you prepared to fight like it's the only term? Though I want good people to be reelected, I'm done with them assuming it's in the bag. I want every single elected to act like it's their last term, and they better make a difference.
People follow winners. We got to win. We got to get victories for home. If not,
Well,
then send us home. Yeah.
I love it. And we're at 4:00. So if you want to give us I need to send you out the invitation for convention, which is April 19th. It's a Friday night. We're inviting all of our state delegates and, of course, our county to do their voting. And we're also inviting our central committee as well as the public. So anybody who wants to meet you should come on out to our county convention. It's April 19th at Tooele High School's auditorium. And I don't know if I've got an email address for you, but I will get you the details for your campaign.
Yeah, you've got an email address for him right there.
Yeah,
the Colby at colbyforutah.com.
Yeah, that works. Well, and then Maddie, my political director, helped with Jared get me on.
And Maddie is outstanding. I want to thank her. She's very pleasant to text with. I'm not a very good texter, and she made it easy without.
Did she represent him at Lincoln Day?
Yes, she was the young lady that was there.
Things.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
And we appreciate your support at Lincoln Day, and we also appreciate your visits here to the county. Again, we're going to share this interview on all the Republican pages, and sometimes Jared even carves it out.
No, it'll be carved up for you to take and do with what you want. It'll
share how you like
everything.
Thank you.
And then convention will offer booth space, but we are advertising convention to the general public. We've got plenty of seating, but we want to get you in front of our delegates at least 3 times. So whether we count this one and I share it to the delegates or you share it to the delegates, also we'll have you in person, and then we'll also have you out for convention. And we hope that you're not competing with us and other counties to get there. We know every county wants you at their convention.
Yeah.
And because running a campaign is expensive, if you guys like what you hear and you want to help, donate at his website, and also consider volunteering. I recommend, though, if you're going to volunteer, make sure you know what you're talking about. Get to know this candidate and never speak for him, but definitely get to know what his values are and what that website means and how to direct people. And I'd like to give you the floor for your last impression to the people of Tooele County and farther.
Sure.
Beyond. Infinity and beyond. Yeah.
Thank you.
For your daughter.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you both for spending this. You've been so generous with your time and talking me through issues that are important. So thank you. You haven't disappointed at all. And,
thank you.
And the friends that we've made in Tooele already have been, we've shut down. The last time we were there last Saturday, we actually shut down the library. Like, they closed and people were still wanting to visit. And so we spilled out into the parking lot, and people were helping Maddie and I load things up. And it was great. That home feeling of Tooele is real and legit. And you guys represented that perfectly today. So thank you.
Thank you.
For me, for the voter, this is a job interview. I'm seeking to be hired by you as your employer. I work for you. And as a result, I see the choice in this election, in my race particularly. It boils down to leadership, judgment, and accountability. All of these issues that we talked about today, you should ask yourself, who has the experience in leadership? Who has that judgment that's been tested both in combat and the corporate world, that can best weigh in on your behalf to make sure that not only our national level is taken care of, but here at home? Who can you trust to truly fight for you and protect us when it comes to land and water and the border, and making sure that our kids are properly educated by us, not by the federal bureaucracy? Those are some of the choices that are at play in this election. And then finally, I'll leave with you. I swore an oath over 30 years ago, be 31 years this summer, that I raised my hand for the first time to support and defend our Constitution. This isn't a concept that I just speak about, or I was elected 3 months ago and now it's important to me. It's something that I've lived for 3 decades. I have friends who've died for it, and I still wear the flag on my shoulder when I'm in the reserves. I still am serving because it's important to me. And that's the trust and the confidence you can have in me when I hopefully earn the right to represent you. That Constitution and what we stand on is everything. And if we're tap dancing off of it, then fire me. I shouldn't be there. And so that's what we're hoping to bring for the people of Tooele and for our 2nd District, give you that choice.
And you'll also commit to being in Tooele County, being accessible to the citizens as if you lived here, I assume.
Yes, for sure. And I even have family that live up north, not too far from there. So again, this is a job interview. And if I'm not connecting and communicating transparently with you, my employers, then I shouldn't be in the job. And so that's the standard that I'm going to hold myself, and then the A team that we're going to build. They're going to be on the rescue for you. And if we're not, then we shouldn't be in the job.
Very good.
That's fantastic.
Everybody, Colby Jenkins. That's colbyforutah.com. Go and check him out. If you go down into the show notes, there'll be one of them. It'll be written in blue. You click on that, it'll take you right to it.
Colby, we really appreciate you taking this long with us
thank
today.
you very much.
And it's a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to having you out again. And please thank your dear wife. I'm sure that it's not an easy feat having a husband running for Congress, but she's probably used to you doing crazy stuff already with 30 years in the military.
Yeah, she's a Green Beret wife. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a special kind of wife. Yeah.
Thank you for your service and the service of your child and your elders. And
thank Maddie for getting us in link and being squared away enough to, make it so even I can figure out what's going on most of the time.
And think about us anytime. If there's something if you ever want to be on again, we would love to have you. You've been a phenomenal guest, and I'm sure there's a lot more we missed that you're going to go, shoot, I should have said this or this. You're welcome anytime. And so, reach out to us. Also, from the party's perspective, if Maddie wants to send me any advertisement, you're doing something or you have a video out or anything like that, get it to me and I'll post it on our GOP pages so that we offer that to every candidate, because our number one rule is educate the populace for better representation. We totally believe in that.
Thank you. Thanks for leading. Thanks for making this possible. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your leadership, sir.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for sharing your time with us.
Thank you, Colby. You have a good one.
Hey, take care.
Bye.
Thank you.